Today, you're in for a treat. We have a former NC grad. Well, she's still a grad, but a former NC student. Aanna Smalley started out as an intern at Stonebridge Christian Church. And after doing that internship and graduating from Nebraska Christian, she got a full-time job working in that, as the children's director, or eventually moved into the children's director position at Stonebridge Christian Church. So we have a grad, we have a children's director, we have Aanna Smalley. Give her an institute welcome.
Nervous. It should be on. Is it on? No. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. If I get really nervous, I need you guys to just start talking over the top of me. Throwing things, slumping in your chairs, acting like you don't care, but then answering every question correctly when we get to the end. Because I do work with kids, and so when I have to speak to a group of people over the age of 10, I am immediately nervous. I could talk to 500 8-year-olds with no problem and feel good about it, but when it's grown-ups, something inside of me immediately panics. And I don't know what it is, but it happens. So if you see me start to freak out, just start acting really immature, and I promise I'll get it back together. All right? So a couple things that I want to tell you so that you kind of know more about who I am, because I think that works better, is that if you're that cameraman in the back, I'm super sorry, I don't hold still. I will walk every side of this stage because I like to do that better. So, sorry, just know that it's coming. My favorite color is green. Lately, it's like the teal and the aqua kind of greens. I know, so all of a sudden you're not excited anymore, but that's okay. It's okay. Love the color green. I drink coffee more than water. Most days, if I'm being honest, I don't drink water. We actually, I know, thank you. This habit has been developed over many years. We have a plant in our office. 3 of us share one office. 3 girls, so 3 girls share one office. We have a plant, one. We've named it Plant. It has an NC sticker on its pot, actually. I know, we're building church leaders or whatever we're doing in a pot. Not with pot, in a pot. Clarify. We have chosen only to feed Plant coffee because we feel like it's the best way for it to grow. And I'm going to tell you, in the last year, Plant has grown almost double the size and is actually standing taller and more full than it ever has before. That is until we discovered that it is actually glued to the windowsill, because I'm not sure what happened, but at some point the coffee sort of started to seep out somewhere. So we're not moving it, and we're not moving offices because we can't get Plant off the windowsill. We're not sure what happened. I worked for 4 years as a barista in both high school and in college, hence the addiction that happened, and I am not ashamed of it. Worked at Scooters at 72nd and Cornhusker, so if some of you work there or go there all the time, I know those people. That's what I did. I'm married, been married for 6 years. We have one dog that I'm really trying to learn to love. He ate a quarter of a coffee cake for my volunteers last weekend off the top of the stove. So we're working on becoming friends and people that like each other. I am chronically late to the point where I actually left like 20 minutes early to get here today because I had this dream last night that Andy started introducing me, and I was like, here but not here. And so he said I was here, and then I wasn't here, and it was really awkward, and then I came up and I lost my train of thought. So I left really early. That's the point. I was here on time today. That will never happen again, I promise. If you have taken one of my classes, I've taught night classes a couple of times, and you'll know I walk in like at 6 o'clock. And you can walk in at 6 o'clock too, because I get it. We're all late sometimes. I really like trashy TV. Don't Judge, Grey's Anatomy, The Bachelor, basically anything on TLC where people are losing massive amounts of weight or doing totally weird things or having 19 children, and I'm totally in on that. So it's okay if you're that kind of person. I don't pray before every meal. I'm thankful every time, but I don't always tell God how great my breadstick was. So that's a little bit about who I am. Andy asked me to come and talk today about goal setting and evaluation, and I'm going to be really honest with you. I got this email And I turned to my staff and I was like, what on earth would make him think I have any idea what I'm talking about with goal setting and evaluation? And they're like, I don't know, which is really, confident building sort of thing. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm going to do this. It'll be good. And so for months, I've been trying to think through this whole goal setting and evaluation thing. And here's what I kind of discovered. I don't always know a lot about what we're doing while we're doing it, but everything that I'm talking about today, we're doing as second nature. All the time. These things have just become natural for us. And so for me and for my team, when it comes to goal setting and evaluation, I don't always know that we're doing it, but we're always doing it. And that's what has made things successful for us, and we love that. I don't ever do things like this without bringing treats. My classes, the students that have been in my class know that. And so today is no exception. Today there are cookies for all of you. And so I have some directions for you with these cookies. Over here in the corner are some bowls that have ingredients in them. There's cookies in every bowl. There's icing. Every one of them has like a tube of icing you can decorate with. There's some sprinkles. So I need one person from each table to come and grab a bowl and bring it back to your table, and then I'll give you more directions. The first direction is don't eat your cookie until you get more directions, okay? You need to hang on to this cookie for just a second. This is not going to be like a how many people can eat the most cookies sort of contest or anything weird, I promise. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to work on these cookies. And here's your criteria. You may use the items in your bowl to decorate the cookies that are in front of you any way that you would like. If you have blue frosting at your table, but you're more of a red frosting kind of guy, go find a friend with red frosting and trade them out, all right? So you can switch around, but when I say stop, wherever you're at in your cookie decorating process, you will be finished. Got it? Go. Okay, I'm going to try this again because I work with kids, so I get it. If you made a cookie and you were voted on, you need to be on the stage. Okay, you got it? Yeah, that was the tuck and roll with the cookie. I'm impressed. Okay, because see, nobody can see you when you're on the ground, and you might be short. This will be more fun. Oh, we even have a mic so you can really talk about your cookie. But when I cut you off, you're done. You get like seconds to talk about this. So you need like a magic word or something. Okay, are you ready? You're passing the mic down when you're ready. Go.
Dinosaur.
Polka dots.
Christmas tree with polka dots.
Mine's supposed to be like crazy sunset and waves.
It was.
A lion named Roar.
A snowflake.
A snowflake.
Cats. Mine just says NC.
This is a masterpiece I like to call,
It's Mr. Monopoly. It's Cross.
Mine's Santa. He's kind of green because he has a real bad hangover.
Mine I like to call Dr. Bob and Bill Thornton pre-beard.
My cookie is contemporary art.
Okay, so we've seen some artwork, and now I'm going to start eliminating some of you. So if you used green frosting, go sit down. I know, you might have thought you had an in because that was my favorite color, but actually you did not, and I'm sorry to hear about Santa. Okay, if you made an animal, go sit down. All the people with the animals. It was a good idea. Everybody loves a good cat. Oh, clever. He's smart, this one. Okay, if you used a scene from nature, go sit down. No, we can't count a dinosaur as nature. A snowflake is from nature. Have you not been outside? Welcome to Nebraska, friends. Okay, yeah, keep coming together. This is great. If when you tip your cookie, something falls off of it, go sit down. It's like the blizzard trick at Dairy Queen, but different. Oh, some of you are feeling very good about yourselves. Poor Mike. It's still contemporary. Looks great. Okay, if it has to do with Jesus, church, NC, the typical answer, go sit down. I know. Okay, so we have, tell me again, Mr. Monopoly, obviously. Polka dots. Dinosaur. If you did not make a cookie that has to do with the movie Frozen, go sit down. Here's the thing. I just gave you an assignment, something that I had in my head, specifically that I wanted for you to do, but I did not provide you with a single tool in order to enable you to do the job that I expected of you. I was waiting for someone to make Olaf on a cookie. Nobody did. If you made Olaf on a cookie and you didn't get voted on the stage, you can start giving mean looks to everybody else at your table because they messed up. When I was in 8th grade, I went to this Christian concert at my church, and the lady that was singing was named Nia, and she was a Welsh lady that had this crazy heart for Albanian people. And so she did like an intermission, and she showed this video, and it was this video of these people living in these water tank villages. And sometime after the war had ravaged the country, people had gone in with these huge water tanks and cut them out and built them into homes. Now, as you imagine, no water, no electricity, you name it. I don't know what it was in my 13-year-old heart, but something grabbed me, and I couldn't let it go. And I went home, and I started talking to my parents about it, and I was like, I'm gonna go there someday, I'm gonna go there someday. And so I started to do research because I couldn't figure out what our organization was called, I couldn't remember, I couldn't figure it out, and as ridiculous as this sounds, Google was not what Google is now. And so I couldn't just like Google it and figure it out. So I started to do research and I found the information, and I was devastated when I figured out that they don't allow teenagers to go on these trips. But I couldn't drop this. It was a thing in me. I had to do this. So I started researching other companies and organizations and missionaries, and I got in touch with Joel Burkham, who's an NC alum, great friend of my parents. And he had just started a mission organization called For God's Children International. And they did mission work in Romania and Moldova, which, if you know anything about geography, butts right up against Albania. And I was set. So I started talking to him and asking him questions. How old do I have to be? Do my mom or dad have to come? I don't care if nobody goes on this trip. I want to do this by myself. I have to do this. And so we worked out all the details, and he said, you're going to need about $1,800. In 8th grade, I didn't have a job. So my freshman year, I got a job at a flower shop. I swept out the cooler, took phone calls, boring stuff. But I had to save money. And being 14, I wasn't really much for the bank, so I took a Nike shoebox and some duct tape, and I duct taped the crap out of that box. And then I cut a very tiny hole in the top so that I could not get my hand inside to steal any of my money back out. I made a savings plan. And with a Sharpie on the top of the box, I would track how much money I had saved. And in 2005, after I had graduated high school, I had more than $1,800 and also 9 other people who had decided that they wanted to do this trip too. And in July, we flew over and we got to spend 2 weeks sharing Jesus with orphans and gypsies who had never heard anything about Jesus before. I set a goal and I did whatever it took to meet the goal. Years of babysitting and working at the coffee shop and working at a clothing store and working at a flower shop. And when my friends were out doing stuff, I was working my hind end off because I had to meet this goal. I've always been a goal setter. Maybe because I'm firstborn, maybe because I'm as type A as they come. Maybe because I love to win. I'm super competitive. And for me, if I meet a goal, I feel like I've won something. But goal setting is so important because when you have the tools that you need, you can do almost anything. I saved for this huge trip, and it turned out to be the kind of trip that changes your life forever. I met people on that trip, kids that were there, adults that went too. I can't tell you the impact that made because I set a goal and I followed through on everything. I just gave you a goal with cookies. I did not give you the tools that you needed in order to be able to accomplish your goal very fairly. And that's part of the deal. Elisa's gonna come up and start drawing some things because I was not born with an artistic bone in my body, and I want you to be able to read this at the end. Also, I have no good handwriting. So she's gonna kind of draw that. And if you want to duplicate what she's drawing, it would probably not be the worst idea. If you have no ability like me, get your phone out and take a picture of it. That counts, all right? I started at Stonebridge in 2009, like Andy said. March, started an internship. August, hired on full-time. The following August, my boss quit. I moved into her position and hired to replace myself. That was a lot already. But on top of all of that, our church started to experience some great change too. We started this 6 o'clock service, 6 o'clock on Sunday night, friends, after we've done morning services that are exactly the same. Nobody else in town was doing something like that at the time. It was nearly impossible to get volunteers. Almost nobody came. We were running about 200 kids, a little less, between the morning services and the evening service. And some of you are saying, that's the size of my whole entire church. That's awesome. But it wasn't for where we were at. It wasn't where we should have been. And so we kept going with this, really believing that we had the ability to do something to reach people that just weren't being reached in the Omaha area. But when things weren't coming together quite the way they should have, we started to realize that we had to lay some foundational pieces down in order for us to move forward. And so that's exactly what we started to do. I know that you talk a lot about vision. It's probably bleeding out of your ears, right? Vision is everything. If you don't have a vision, you don't have anything. They're right. You have to have a vision. And I won't talk a lot about that because I don't need to beat a dead horse. But the vision is the foundation for everything else that's coming. So at Stonebridge, our vision or our foundation is sharing Jesus with kids, building believers. At every point, with everything we do, we check back to that. So for us, sharing Jesus with kids, we know that that's our first number one big thing that we get to do. So every opportunity we have, we're just trying to make sure kids get the chance to bump elbows with Jesus when they walk in our doors. Simple. We're not trying to do anything over the top. Once we've had that opportunity to help them bump elbows with Jesus, then we want to build them into believers. And we know that that's more of an investment type of piece. And we're in on that. We've stemmed all of this from Psalm 1:3. And if you read that, you'll understand that we really love this value of kids being planted along the riverbank and growing and bearing fruit each season. And we want that for our kids. So we've picked this verse that connects back to this vision, which is the foundational piece that we need to move on. When we have that in the front of us, everything we do is a heart check back to that vision. Every single thing that we do. We have to make sure that works. So that's your foundation. That's it. That's all we're talking about with vision. But I need you to kind of imagine this house building process with me. If you've ever built a house, the framework is what comes next after the foundational stuff is done. And this is what I think is the cool part, because all of a sudden when somebody's like, oh, the north bathroom will be over there, and then we'll have a kitchen over here with an island here, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. Now when these walls start coming up, you're like, oh, great idea, love it. So we need these walls. We need this framework. And the framework in this equation are really your values. What are the things that you're going to use to clarify your vision or your foundation? So we have 5 of those with our kids, and I won't go through all of them. But the first couple, we want kids to love God. Why? Because we're sharing Jesus with kids. We want kids to love people. Again, that's part of that building believers thing. We need them to understand that. And so for us, the framework are those values that help guide us in our vision. Those things might be specific to me, to my ministry, to my church, but they're not specific to Kidman. So you might be a teaching pastor at a church. You still need values. What is it that you want your people to know? How do you want them to learn that? What does your environment look like? How does it feel? Those are the things that your values are going to be built on. Why does that matter? Are you cool with them showing up in sweats and a tank top? That's a part of your value system, even if it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Those values, those framework pieces, they are what hold up the whole rest of the building. If you throw some walls up and you never anchor them to a foundation, your house is going to go splat. Foundational pieces are huge. The next thing that happens is that you start to fill it out. Plumbing, electrical, drywall, insulation, plywood. You guys know. You've seen buildings come together. Those pieces are where it gets really fun for me. Because even though in a real house that's not cool, this is the fun stuff. So for us, we want kids to love God. So our filling it out piece is, how are we teaching kids to love God? Well, first and foremost, we're giving them examples of how God provides for people, how he loves us, how he cares for us, straight from the Bible. So that's the best thing that we know how to do. And then we're backing that up by teaching them how to find those answers on their own. We need them to feel confident they have the ability to do this on their own, by themselves, whether they have people in their life that can help them with that or not. We want for kids to understand who God is, what his character is like, and that they matter to him. So when we're sharing Jesus with kids, we're just simply trying to unwrap who God is in a way that they can really understand. If we're teaching kids to love people, well, the easiest thing that we do is show them how much God loves people. So we tell them stories about God loving people or Jesus hanging out with the unlikable. And then we reinforce that by loving them. And in Kidman, that includes the child who just vomited on the nursery floor. It includes the kid who cries on and off for an hour. It includes the kid who, instead of sitting nicely, is standing on the table. But it also includes the kid whose grandpa just died last week. It includes the kids whose grandma brings them to church because their parents aren't in the picture. It includes the kid who is there every week, knows every answer, has been in church forever. We just have to show them that we love them no matter who they are or what they're like. But then we ask them to start loving other people too. We think and we believe that loving kids is the best way to fill out that framework of teaching them to love people. It's highly valuable to us. We can't mess that up. So I want you to think for just a second, if you can give me an example of a ministry value that you see being fulfilled and how you see that fulfilled. So it might be at a church that you're attending, it might be at a church that you are interning at, working at, it might be here at school. What is a value that you see? How is it being filled out? So, for instance, we value first impressions at Stonebridge. We think of the visitor above everything else. So we don't use words like come to the table to talk about communion. Because if you're not a church person, that means you're planning to have a meal with us. And we're not serving tacos. That's confusing to a first-time person. So we have a staff pastor in place set to oversee all of that. Taylor Hyatt is that person for us. She handles everything from the decorations in the lobby to the volunteers that coordinate the coffee bar to what kind of drinks are served at the coffee bar. She handles the Connection Center, which is our hub of information, so that when someone walks in the door, someone has held the door open for them, greeted them, gotten them a free cup of coffee, given them information, and helped them find a seat. She's integral to that process. We can't do it without her. So that is a value, first-time person, and how it's fulfilled. So take just a second. If you can think of something, I'm not a hand-raising kind of person, just shout it at me. What's something that you see valued, and how do you see it being fulfilled? Do you love being put on the spot? I do. Are none of your churches doing anything well? Ouch, huh? What does your church value? What do you see them care about when you walk in the door? Relationships. So how is your church meeting that relationship value? Okay, so there's a level of accountability that's happening at a relational level that's ensuring that your relationship with God is good, your relationship with them is good, and your relationship with your church is good. Okay, great. Anybody else have an example? Okay, so how are they answering that need for first impressions and creativity? Okay, so she said they're looking for ways specifically to involve people through creative meetings, but then also to demonstrate that creativity on a Sunday morning in a way that's going to capture the attention of people who are not quote-unquote church people, right? They're valuing something that's super important to them, and then they're filling it out. They're putting meat and potatoes on it. They're making it have some weight, some girth behind it. You don't value something if you're not doing anything about it. Right? I tell you how much I care about you, but I never show you. I don't really value you, but I'm really good at talking out both sides of my mouth. In ministry, it's really easy for you, for me, for us to say, I value, and then don't do anything about it. Looks good on your website. It looks great on a program that's printed out. But if your kids don't know what your values are, not word for word, but if they can't sense that from you, we're not filling it out well enough. Pack it in there. It's okay. Nobody's going to get tired of feeling valued. Just as a house is only a house until you got foundation, you got framework. Now you've done some of that filling it out stuff, the meat and potatoes stuff. Now you get to add extra to it because it's really just an empty box with no furniture, right? So now you get to furnish it. And I love this because if I go to your grandma's house, she probably has a very particular furnishing style. For my grandparents, it was olive green carpet, and they had this yellow couch with burnt orange flowers on it. They had 4 recliners in their living room. I don't know why. There were 2 of them. Their house was 80 degrees at all times, and I'm not sure a decoration had been moved since they moved in 1964. But they furnished it, and it was totally them. You need to furnish your ministry, too, whatever that is. So that 4th step to goal setting and evaluation is furnishing it. And this is where the evaluation part really comes in. Everything else had to do with goal setting, and that's great because that's how you have to start out, right? But now you're doing the fun stuff. The furnishing it is my favorite part. It really involves sitting down and thinking through what is it going to take to make this happen. So without trying to give you too much detail, because my husband told me I would lose you if I did this. On a Sunday morning, we work with kids that's birth through 5th grade for me and for my team. And so we have to have some certain things in place to ensure that we're providing a great place for kids to be. I have to have appropriately sized rooms for the kids I'm going to have. I can't have 40 4th and 5th graders show up and then I have a room for 18. What do I do with them? I have to have appropriately sized furniture. I don't want a 4th grader in a booster chair or a 3-year-old sitting in a fold-up chair. 3-year-olds can be folded up. It's not a good idea. Don't try it. We have to measure these things out. For us, a check-in system is super important. I have to know who's there. I have to know how often they've been there. I have to know that when their dad comes back and says he checked them in, that legitimately happened, so that I know that he can take that kid back home again. I have to verify security and safety. All of those things are of utmost importance to me because I can't share Jesus with kids and build believers if I haven't made sure that I've provided a place for them to have that happen. a safe place for that to happen. Beyond that, we have to make sure that we have paid staff pastors overseeing individual age groups to make sure that Jesus is being shared on every level. We have key people in place that welcome people, that check people in, that do the hello and the goodbye every week. And we make sure we have a lead in each room that's qualified to teach. We're not going to bring somebody in who just figured out that Jesus was here a month ago and then expect them to start sharing those stories with kids because they don't know. They've got to be qualified to be in that position. Then we'll staff classroom assistants to make sure that everybody's good to go. Those are just snippets of things. You have to understand, I need Kleenex, we have boogers. I need Clorox wipes, we have to clean up messes. I need paint because we like to make messes. All of those things are a part of that process too. But that's part of that filling it out. If I'm going to have kids show up on a Sunday, I better be ready. What am I doing? So let's take KidMin out of it, because really, KidMin and student ministries are super detail-oriented with this kind of stuff. You have to be. But let's say that you're a worship person. You have to fill stuff out too. So if your goal is that every Sunday you're going to have a bass player, an acoustic, an electric, keys, and vocalists on stage, you have to evaluate a couple of things. Do you have the equipment necessary for all of those things? Do you actually have stage space for that? Are you going to use in-ears or not? Can your sound system handle all of that stuff being plugged in for you? Do you even have the people necessary with the talent needed to fulfill those roles? It's great to say I want a bass player, but a kid going boom, 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 boom is not fulfilling the need that you have. You have to have people to plug into those spots. That's part of that filling it out thing. So it's not just a KidMin thing or a student ministry thing. It's a first impressions thing. It's a small groups pastor thing. It's the lady that gets the communion together thing. Everybody has these little things that they have to fill out in order to make this stuff work. And I'm sure if you're a worship person, I probably forgot things that are really valuable, but I'm not a worship girl, so I just made that up. The last thing that you need are finishing touches. And so figuratively speaking, this is like the side table or the vase of your house. But in ministry, these are the things that really put you over the top. You see, I have an expectation of how things in my ministry should go, and the bar is set really high. And because we've set that bar high, my parents who show up on a Sunday or a Wednesday or a special event have this super high expectation of how things are going to go too. We did that on purpose. Mediocre is not acceptable to me, especially when it comes to Jesus. So when I'm laying this foundation and putting up this framework and filling it out and furnishing it and adding these finishing touches are like the above and beyond sort of pieces. So for us, you can go ahead and start running some of those slides. We have chosen to spend money to theme out our space, and you'll see some of those pictures here. For us, that's valuable, and there are some leaders in children's ministry specifically who will tell you that that doesn't really matter. Don't spend your money there, but I respectfully disagree. Friends, I get one chance to make a first impression with a kid. One. If they walk into a space that looks and feels like kids, I got them. But if I walk into a space with their parent and it's a gray room with some toys and buckets thrown on the floor, I gotta work super hard to get their attention back. Super hard. So you'll see in some of our pictures, some of them are just pictures of our hallways and how that looks. But there's also Christmas decorations up. Because for us, that's another little finishing touch. We want our kids to show up stoked that it's Christmas time. So we spent time last week, hours and hours, doing Christmas decorations. And when our kids showed up yesterday, they were like, Miss Aanna, it's Christmas! And I was like, yeah, it is. This is cool. They love it. They were sold. They wanted to be a part of what was happening there because we went over the top. Just a little bit. And you don't have to have a lot of money to do this stuff. You don't have to have tons of time or like this massive staff that can get things done. You just have to decide what is going to be that one thing that puts it over the top. Practically speaking, for us, our check-in system has certain requirements. We have to have touch screens. We have to have certain label printers. We have to have a membership to the software that we use. Those are finishing things. Because I could just have parents sign their kids in with a pencil on a piece of paper, but that's not good enough for me. If 400 kids show up on a Sunday morning, piece of paper is not going to cut it anymore. So we've had to make these extra decisions that have gotten us to where we are. Here's what I can tell you. When we started to make all these changes at Stonebridge, at our church, adding the 6 o'clock service, then we moved some service times around, then we added another morning service, then we built on so that we had a video venue, and now I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do with 6 services, because I got an email that said, we're having this new service, it starts in 6 weeks, you'll need 75 new volunteers. Have you ever had to recruit 75 people to work with children? It's like saying, who would like to feed the lion at the zoo? Anyone? There's steak in the fridge. They look at you like you're nuts. But we had all of this already in place. We had this solid foundation. We built this framework. We filled it out. We furnished it. We had all of these cool little finishing touches. So when I go after Kayla, I can say, hey, you love video games, and I know that about you. I have got 4th and 5th graders that are all about video games right now. So actually, we bought a TV and an Xbox, and we've put it in their room for opening time. You're the girl I want in there. Because I know you're going to kill it. You are that piece that when they walk in the room, they're going to be like, oh, a normal person goes here. But if I didn't have that stuff in place, ready to go, for me to come to Kayla and say, hey, I know kids aren't really your thing, but I was really hoping you would do this with me. Is that something you would consider? She's like, give me the details. And if I don't have those already worked out, she's a no. Hands down. I can't afford no's in ministry. For some of these kids, they walk in the door, and that's the one and only chance I ever get to make sure that they understand who Jesus is. The one chance. And when I have the girl that walks in, her mom did drugs and has several charges on her record for prostitution. They lived out of her car for years. She has 2 younger sisters. She's kind of one of the guys. She doesn't really like girls. They're a little fluffy for her. And so she plays basketball. She wears Nike shoes that are a size 10. She has an afro out to here. And she lets me touch it. I always think it's the coolest hair ever. She comes in with a chip on her shoulder every single week. And my first job is to knock it off. Because I can't get anywhere without that. And so when I have to have all of this stuff already done, it takes a little work on the back end, but when that girl shows up, I can give her my undivided attention, knowing that everything else is ready. So that when she comes and she's like, hey, I think I want to get baptized, the waterworks flow because I'm that girl. And I hug her and squeeze her and tell her how proud I am of her. But for the first time in a long time for her, this is something that makes sense. Jesus cared enough to die on the cross for her so that she didn't have to. Not many people made sacrifices for her, but he did. And all of this stuff is in place so that all I have to do is share Jesus with kids and build believers. And hopefully, today when you walk away, you don't just remember that I let you have a cookie, which I did. But I hope that you remember that even if you think you have this solid vision in place, go back and revisit it. Make sure it really fits every part of who you are and who your church is. And if you're not in a ministry yet, you're missing out because you already are. Do you rep Jesus somewhere? Are you serving people? Are you in a church? Do you attend a Christian college? Your ministry already started. You should have a vision in place, foundation. You should kind of know what your framework is. You should get things ready. Because pretty soon people are going to start showing up. They're attracted to Jesus. And you've got to have your plan in place. Thank you guys for letting me come.
Thanks for that. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks for that. That's for you. So I want to lean in for just a couple minutes on volunteers because this is something that applies to everybody, and you have a bunch probably, and like you said, all of a sudden you need some more, and it's critical. I think probably mostly critical in children's ministry though.
Yes.
Is quality and the right number. I mean, there's laws about numbers of volunteers and kidsmen. So
Yep.
I want to lean in on volunteers a little bit. How do you know how many you need? First of all, how do you know where to start with recruiting volunteers?
Well, if you walk into your room and it's chaos, probably you don't have enough.
That's a good point.
For us, with kids, you get to look at state ratios. Daycares have ratios. The state says you should only have 1 adult for every 4 babies. So we kind of play off of that, and we can recruit to that need. But there's also this thing with parents where they have decided what a good ratio looks like without knowing it, and they'll walk into a room and go, I'm not putting them in there. Then I need to start recruiting more people. Even if I'm at state ratio, if parents are not feeling good about where we're at, it's time to haul more people in.
It sounds like maybe that's happened.
No.
No. Okay. Good.
Never.
Good for you.
We're perfect.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Nothing. So how do you go about this process? How will you go about recruiting 75 volunteers in the next few weeks?
Well, if something like that happens, and it has on more than one occasion, the best thing that I can tell you to do with volunteers is, first of all, start with the volunteers that you have and ask each one of them to either work on recruiting someone on their own or point out someone to you that they think would be a good fit somewhere. They might be a baby person and they only love babies, but they might know somebody who really only loves 4th graders. And so go after those people. Secondly, we date almost everybody that we recruit. And that sounds a little ridiculous, but we want to walk in with their favorite candy bar. We want to know what they do for fun. So we spend some time getting to know them, because later when we're looking for a way to let them know how valuable they are to us, we have all the tools in pocket ready to be used to back that up. So things like that help. Obviously, casting vision. We want them to understand we don't need babysitters, or I like to call them butts in a chair. We don't need any old butt in a chair on a Sunday morning. I need somebody valuable who wants to be there, who's investing, who's sold. Those are the best volunteers. So when we can communicate why it's valuable for them to serve, they're in every time.
Yeah, it's actually does a disservice to the ministry if you've got people who just are filling a seat, just have their butt in a chair because they don't really want to be there, and therefore the experience goes down and Jesus doesn't get shared. And yeah, so that's good. So will you go up and from up front and say, hey folks, we're looking for volunteers, or will you, like on a Sunday morning, or will you have someone else do that, and then what's the process like? Walk us through how that's going to go down.
Okay, so I never do a big ask from the stage, and here's why. If I said, I have 15 free Starbucks cards, the first people to come up and get them may have them, you'll come, right? But if I say, I have 40 4th and 5th graders showing up and I'm having to close a classroom every week because I don't have enough volunteers, you're like, oh, that's too bad. There's no reward or payoff when I present it that way. But when I come to you personally, when I know you and I know where you're going to fit well, it's really easy for me to say, hey, I have the perfect spot for you. And I know how this is going to work. So we do a lot of personal things. We do a 1-for-1 campaign every year, and we ask every volunteer to recruit a volunteer. And they can recruit them to serve in their room with them. They can recruit them to serve at the same service, or maybe with their age group, but at the opposite service. So they kind of know what's going on. But we ask every volunteer to do that. I shamelessly bribe people because I know that payoffs and rewards really work. So for every name that gets turned into us in that 1-for-1 campaign, our volunteer gets their name entered in to win a $100 Target card or a $50 Shields card. They're not doing it for the prize is to reward them for doing it. And that's part of the difference. They are already chasing people down. One lady recruited her entire family. She got her name in there like 20 times, and she won, obviously. But things like that back it up, and they see that to us, it's important enough to offer something valuable for them at the end. So things like that help too.
Yeah, that's good. Now I want to talk about the volunteers, but how do you drive the vision through the team? even down to, well, let's start high level. So how do you make sure everybody that's volunteering for you understands their role and why it's important they do this? And I mean, how do you drive it, not just the first time, but like, how do you keep it
Sure.
in place? You know what I mean?
The first time we recruit a volunteer, we walk them through an orientation process. First page of our handbook is our logo, the second page is our contact information, and the third page has our vision and our values written on it. We don't go any further till we've gotten past that part. They have to have my phone number because eventually they are going to wake up sick on a Sunday, so I need them to have that. But they can't do their job till they know what the vision and values are, and so that's the initial impact there. But then continually, every week, our volunteers get an email that goes out to them. It has a devotion in it, and it often shares a story, a success story of something great that's happened with kids. In turn, on Facebook, we have a volunteer-only page. It's a closed group where we get to spotlight some volunteers who've done a great job that week. All of those things just keep reinforcing, hey, you know that super tough kid that showed up? I just want you to know I got an email from her grandma, and she wrote down the Bible verse and is working on memorizing it at home. I just want you to know that. And stuff like that really starts to stick with those volunteers. If we have to make big changes, we've moved some classrooms around before, we always emphasize that this move, this room swap, is to make room for that vision to happen. And that's really important to us.
Yeah, so it's initially you let them know about it, but then it's kind of always in front of them via narrative, a story, or when you're making changes, you keep the vision out there in front of them. That's really good. That's how it works. I've seen that done before. Now talk about how you communicate on in a more direct sense. You mentioned can they show up in sweatpants and a tank top?
Right.
I'm assuming the answer is no. But how do you make sure everybody knows that and why? And then when someone shows up like that, anyways, how do you handle that?
Well, if it's a volunteer, it's in the handbook. So I always have something to refer back to. It sounds silly, but we always tell people we want you to be dressed appropriately, and we're not going to tell you what to wear or how to wear it, but if you bend over to pick up a baby and I see your belly button, you got to rethink that outfit today. So we try to do it lightheartedly, but letting them know that there is an expectation. The other thing is that every new volunteer gets a t-shirt from us. They get a volunteer t-shirt. And so we know that for sure they have one thing they can wear that's totally appropriate. And if need be, we'll go grab a t-shirt for them, and that's totally fine. But stuff like that makes a difference too. We just remind them that the way they look represents our whole ministry. And you will never find me or anybody on my team running around in high heels and a dress on Sunday because we spend a lot of time on the floor. So we wear jeans almost every week because that's what's comfortable for us working with kids. And that's an okay thing for our volunteers too. We expect them to dress for the job. You don't wear a suit to be a plumber. Dress for the job. What makes sense for you?
It's good. Okay, how do you, let's go back to values a little bit. You were talking about determining values. Where do you start? Say you're inheriting something, inheriting a ministry, and you had someone, maybe over you at first, but then you inherited it. But maybe even, you just got hired to do this thing, and they didn't have anybody. And you inherit this ministry. How do you, where do you start with determining foundation? And maybe the church doesn't have a great foundation set, you know what I'm saying? How would you go about beginning that process of seeing what needs to be done first?
If you were here when Mick Schultz spoke, he said that your value, your vision has to be reflective of your church's value and vision. And so if you're walking into a ministry or starting a ministry from scratch, you got to start with your leadership and see what it is that they want for ministry and what their vision for your church is, and then build yours off of that. And it can be reflective wording, or it can just be a comparable idea, but it needs to be reflective of your church's overall value and vision. If you're walking in inheriting something, that's exactly what happened with me. The vision piece was already there, but when I sat down and started to think about what really matters to me, and for me with kids, it was what do I want them to know by the time they leave 5th grade and they go into student ministries? How do I set our student ministries pastor up to succeed? That has to be a part of it. And so for us, it was as simple as it came. They got to love God. They got to love people. They got to know how to talk to God. They have to know how to share God with others. And ultimately, we want them to choose God. Simplest form, but what are the goals? What do you want kids to know? What do you want people to experience in worship? what do you want that to look like? That's what you value.
Talk a little bit about that, the goal setting and evaluation of the spiritual side of things, right?
Sure.
We know the goal kind of, but be specific about your ministry. How did you, and what are maybe the goals that you have for them as they, what do you want them to look like when they leave and go to student ministry? And well, I'll say, this will be a separate question probably, but I'm gonna say it now. Like, how do you play well with student ministry?
Sure.
I mean, how do you guys work intentionally on that transition?
Yeah. When we kind of determined what those values were, I am a list maker to the nth degree. And so I sat down and wrote those 5 values down that we have. And then I ripped apart everything that we're doing and plugged them into every one of the values that it applied to. For me, if we didn't do something that applied to at least 2 values, we nixed it. It wasn't worth my time, my resources, my volunteers, my kids. We got rid of it. And so that eliminated some things for us. We were doing some things that have just always been done because they've always been done. And I refuse to follow something because it's tradition if it carries no weight with the value that we're doing. And so we went through and kind of lined everything up. And some things we do knock out all 5 values every time. And some are only ever going to hit 2 values. But if it doesn't line up with a value, you're wasting your resources on that. And we knew that. So that was kind of how we decided what stuck. And also it was an accountability system for us to know that the stuff we were doing actually checked back with what we valued. Because that's super important, especially if you inherit a ministry. You may find that your church has always done this big chili supper, and so you're supposed to do this chili supper, but you don't know why you're doing this chili supper. If there's no value in it, you're just feeding people. And that's fine, but it's probably not a church-wide event that your ministry needs to sponsor. And it's okay to say, hey, leadership, why are we doing this? And they might have an answer you don't have, and that's great. But it's okay to double check that. As far as lining up what we're doing with what student ministry is doing, that is 100% relationship. The student ministries pastor at Stonebridge is Alex Hall, and he and I entered NC together as freshmen. And so I sang on an outreach team, and he would preach. And we would travel together a lot on the weekends. And so a friendship built there right away, or at least a trusting relationship. So we knew each other well. When we both were hired at the church, he was actually there 2 years before I started at Stonebridge. And we already knew each other. We already had rapport. If we didn't, it would have been my job to build rapport with him. He has to trust me. Silo ministry kills. So anything that we can do to start clustering together, my kids are only my kids till they move to 6th grade, and then they're his kids. And so if I've done all this work and laid this foundation and started this house, but I give it to him and it's super broken down and in shambles, he's not able to start his job at A. He's having to go way back before that and teach them that there are letters. So it's super important to understand that it is not about you in ministry. You are not the end goal, but there's always something coming next. So figuring out what that next is helps you to determine how you're going to connect all of those together.
Good stuff. Does anyone have a burning question they've just been wanting to ask? You've been sitting here, something came up, you're like, you know, I'd really like to ask her that. Anyone? Going, this is dangerous. Going to the crowd. No one. No one. Good. That's what I hoped. Just kidding. Nobody? We're good. Oh, I see that hand. Yes.
Yes.
Repeat the question real quick.
Yeah,
have you ever
repeat it.
gotten into a situation where you didn't have the resources or volunteers to pull off what you need to pull off, and what happened?
One time yesterday, okay, let's be honest, the flu, it is going around in this place. People are vomiting everywhere, and their children are getting sick, and they're showing up sick, and the kids at church are sick. It can literally feel like you are in a minefield, or it like cannot possibly get any worse. And so if you're not a think on your toes kind of person, then you better have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D in place before it happens so that when it happens, you know what you're doing. Now, you might be a think on your toes kind of person, and that's great for you. So for us, yesterday, 2 volunteers, the only volunteers in a room, both have the stomach flu. We find out 30 minutes before church starts. And I know I have kids coming to that room. So a staff person went into the room and waited until we kind of knew every kid was checked in. And then we looked at numbers in other rooms, and we started to combine rooms so that we had ratios correct, rooms correct, and a great experience for the kids that were there. That was a simple fix for us. It has happened in much larger scales before, but you might wind up with your lead vocalist Sunday who has laryngitis. There is no coming back from that on a Sunday morning. So if you don't have somebody else already on your team that can lead, you probably didn't get that set up well from the beginning. So it's always just kind of thinking through, not worst case scenario, but is there a fix for things that are likely to happen? And then figuring out what that is if you don't have a fix in place.
Good stuff. Anybody else? Any questions coming up now you're thinking of? Thank you. How can the worship department help the children's department?
Good, I always love this question. You know, a lot of this has to do with the look, feel, and culture of your church. For some churches, they have kids in the worship service the whole time, right? And so, or maybe they're just in there for the songs, and that's what people think of when they think of the worship department, the music. And so, if you know you're going to have kids in there the whole time, and that's kind of your church's goal, can you do one thing in the service that points to kids? One thing that's going to elevate them or help them. It might be a song where there's some action to it. It might be a song you just really know that the kids love, or something that's a simple verse and chorus that they can learn really easily. But what's something that you can do that's going to lead those kids that are in there? Now, you might be a church like Stonebridge, where we have kids programming through every service, the entire service. And truly, we hope that's where kids are at. But you're still going to wind up with kids in a worship service. So expecting the baby who's going to cry through the entire prayer that you have really nicely and eloquently planned, have a backup plan for that. How are you going to keep yourself in line with what you're trying to do so that you don't get distracted by the screamer in the back? Things like that even help guide what's going on. And again, anything you can do not to condemn the kids that are in there by saying, you know, we have a really great worship program here, but our kids program is really where you belong, so if you have kids, it's time to take them down. That never goes over well with parents. So anything that you can do to make that a great experience for the kids that are there is wonderful. Not required, probably a good idea.
So to back up from that, it's the same thing as is with student ministry. It's like if you trust these people, right, and
Right.
on the team, you know what's happening, at least on some level, and you trust those people, you'll speak positively of that or be prepared for things like that. And that gets back to kind of staff culture stuff, which we'll be actually talking about next semester with the Third City Christian Church staff. So that's going to be exciting. Last call on questions. Anybody else? Yeah.
When you align your programming with the vision, how do you handle the staff person who has a program that doesn't accept what your vision is? He's got to really articulate to make it sound like it works with your vision. So you might not have vision, but you still have that program anyway.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I can. So Dr. Huddleston's asking if you have this very firm vision in place, but you have that one person that can talk their way in or out of anything, and they have somehow made this one thing sound like it fits the vision, but you know full well that it does not, what do you do about that? How do you make that work? I can't do anything about that, but my leadership can. And so if you really feel like something isn't a good fit, it's great for you to take that to your leadership and say, do you guys see how this fits? Where is this lining up? What does that look like? And they might really believe what the other person does, and you might find out that you're the one in the wrong, which stinks, but it could happen. And so if that's the case, even if it's not your favorite idea, you've got to back that, because leadership is saying, yes, this ties in, and here's how. On the other hand, leadership might say, you're right, I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything, but they really like to do it. So I'm going to find out from them why that's happening. Usually, for us, that means somebody on leadership has gone to that person and asked a whole bunch of questions, and then they've kind of weighed out how that works. But probably you shouldn't just let it fly because they really made it sound like it works. If it doesn't work, it's okay to be the accountability person that's checking in on that and making sure that it actually connects back to your skeleton, to what matters to you.
Really good. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Would you pray for us
Yeah.
as we continue to do ministry this semester and all that stuff, and then we'll dismiss after that.
Yeah, absolutely. God, it's an honor and a joy to be here today and to know and understand that whether there's a student in here that feels like they really got all this stuff down and this was just regurgitated information that they needed to kind of help them understand that they're on the right track, or whether this is the kind of thing that somebody's hearing for the first time or never really thought about how it applies to them. At some point, I am absolutely positive that every person is going to encounter a situation in ministry where they're going to need to lead through it. And you've given us pretty specific directions and ideas on how to do that. And so I ask that as ministry moves forward, whether it is right now or in 4 years when graduation happens, that you start to lay the groundwork for every student, professor, pastor, to build a solid vision and values and to grow off of that and to make those things most important to them. That can happen at school too for students, and I know that. So I just ask that whatever needs to be put into place to help them to be the most successful, that you implement those things for them now to make that easier. God, we're grateful that you have provided us with the tools we need to do the very best job, and we understand that you value excellence, and all of this falls into line with that too. It's in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
See you next week, everybody.